Hi, I'm Alistair Gordon. I'm a marketing professional. And when you say that, I know that there's a lot of you out there think he can't be. He hasn't got a spiffy suit and he's not waving his arms about wildly, talking passionately with lots of jargon. But really, all the materials on this website and all the things I want to talk to you about are about why you don't need to be some sort of guru with a polka dot bow tie or something before you can come to grips with marketing and do better marketing for yourselves. But in this first session, I really want to talk about what I think motivates consumers to buy, why customers buy things at all, and how that changes and what might be changing in the kind of turmoil that we've got around us at the moment. How are customers adapting? So we're going to start with that, and then I'm hoping you'll go on and look at some of the other materials to help yourselves with some of the bigger marketing issues that are facing small and medium businesses of all sorts at the moment. Okay, look, I'm not sure whether this young woman in the diagram represents me or you or your customers, but there's a lot of worries, anxiety and discomfort generally out there, uncertainty. Clouds of worries around people at the moment, and clearly this affects business and people's motivations. That's what I want to talk about today, how we might expect those things to change and what the implications are for people like yourselves. So will it all be doom and gloom and tears and sorrow? I think we can take some lessons from the past, from previous recessions and so on. And we can say, I think, that for the poor, those that were poor before the COVID-19 crisis, it's going to be tough times. But one of our tasks as marketers is to look at the upsides and the silver linings that may occur in people's lives, as well as just seeing the obvious awful things. And those people that are particularly poor may be less stigmatized and maybe more social sympathy. Let's hope so. And in that case, organisations and businesses that reach out and are seen to be helping will be seen in a good light. For the rest of the population, doubtless there'll be stress and income reductions and may take a toll. But there'll also be things, some sense of relief. People will get into new activities. They've new things have happened to them in lockdown. They've got new skills and just coping. Maybe they thought everything was going to be apocalypse now, and they found they can cope, and they take pride in that. They take pride in the way they're managing their families and their lives. Some of the things about social solidarity and community activities will be valued. So what is important is that you look and watch for those signs of silver linings coming through the clouds of worries and help people feel proud about those and take those into account in your marketing as well. Okay, right now out there will be a number of major companies and corporations doing lots of surveys and focus groups to try and understand how the crisis and all the things that are happening, all those clouds of worries, are affecting the minds of their customers and consumers. Now, we can't do that because you haven't got all those bucks, right? So I'm going to do the next best. I'm going to guess. It won't be as good as if we did real research, but it is free. And this is based on my experience. This is the kind of groups that I think will start to emerge in terms of consumer and customer mindsets. There'll be the people that are basically unaffected, what I call the unaffected observers. They've got a secure income, people who may delay big expenditure. Perhaps they'll trade down a bit. They'll go for the second brand of wine, not the top shelf. But they're going to be mostly unaffected. They may bargain hunt a bit even. They may buy the big appliances because they are on special. They may take advantage of low-cost holidays that are around or whatever. Then there'll be the eternally optimistic. You probably know a couple of these. These are people who are going to say, well, hey, it'll all come back. People are worrying too much, so it'll be all right. The virus isn't as bad as all that sort of thing. And they've got an investment, a mental investment in trying to keep going, to wait it all out. And they may even accumulate debt to sustain what they regard as the normal, deserved lifestyle. Then there will be the group that is what I will call cautiously concerned. They're affected, not desperate. Maybe they've had their hours cut at work or something, they can't get overtime, you know, they've got tighter budgets, maybe some adult children have had to come home or whatever. So they're more concerned about price and they're worried about the value of products a little more than they used to be, but they're okay. The fourth group, though, is the worried and withdrawn. Those are people who've actually had something really happen to them. They've lost a job. You know, they've got their situations become desperate. They're going to have trouble paying their mortgage or whatever. These are the people that are forced to cut back. They're not cut back because they're being cautious, but they're cutting back because they have to. They're people that were doing okay before and were hopeful about the future, but are probably angry at their lost lifestyle. Finally, there's those people that were poor even before the recession, well, before things happened. They may have a slight advantage of having some coping mechanisms and knowing how to spin the budget out of bit already, and not being in the market for big products anyway. But now, if things do continue to not improve, they may have to cut back on necessities. They too are likely to be angry because they're losing their hope at getting out of their situation. So you've got these different groups, and you can see in them at least some of them where some of the anger and social unrest we're seeing around the world might be having its roots. What I want you to do with this sort of thinking, this idea of grouping your customers and consumers by their mindsets, is trying to see if you can put your own customers and your own people that you deal with into these kind of groupings, so you can start to empathize with them and their situation and start to track how many of them are in the different kinds of groups that you see out there. We have to be really aware of as marketers is that in this time there's going to be a huge amount of volatility. Customers will, as I say on this chart, be a bit weird. If you think about it, the numbers in each of those mindsets that I just talked about will vary markedly depending on the shape of the recovery and how long the problems go on and whatever. And individuals will fluctuate between the mindsets. You know, one day you might wake up, you're definitely in the eternal optimistic category, and the next day you're worried. You can also think about the fact that within family groups or community groups, there'll be people that are kind of in conflict because they're in different mindsets. There will be, you know, your partner might be an eternal optimist who thinks it's time to go out and buy the new car, while you are more of the withdrawn and worried, thinking I can't see where my next paycheck's coming from. I really don't want to do anything. I just want to hide. If you have that within these sort of dynamics, you can imagine how the stress will go up and down. The key point is that over the next year, at least, I think customer behaviour is likely to be volatile. It's likely to go up and down and change. And I don't mean just because of the economic circumstances, it's just because the mindsets, the motivational mindsets of people are likely to be quite volatile. It's just a factor of all that's going on. And in that sense, it's probably unwise to base long-term strategies or even investments on what you see in the next few months. Be an observer, watch, but be careful about what you do, and thinking that what I see now is a sign of all the things that will happen at this time next year. I think very few people really know what the state of mind of the populace will be in next July. So if your customers are going to behave a little bit more weird in the coming months, I think it's really important that we get on top of why that's happening and how they make buying and purchasing decisions or decide between different services. Yeah. And I'm going to simplify a lot of complex marketing jargon and theory into a couple of dimensions for why customers do stuff, essentially. So I apologize to other marketers if I'm using these terms really, really loosely. Firstly, there's the emotional versus rational decision in purchasing behavior. Now, emotions are, let's not to get too technical about this, but they're just feelings, impressions, desires, that subconscious things that allow us to do things on a habitual basis without thinking about them too much. It's not stupid or unreasonable. Imagine yourself going around a supermarket and looking at every bottle of tomato sauce or whatever and examining every benefit and dimension before you made a choice. You'd never get out of the supermarket. Emotions help us make decisions easily without thinking too much. Then there are all the rational reasons, the budget and the size and all that sort of stuff. The core point is for you is that in most buying decisions, in most categories, even if you're making garden tiles, even if the emotional component is just whether the salesperson smiles or not, the buying decisions are usually a mix of both emotional and rational. So the second dimension of customer buying behavior that you should think about is how motivations for buying goes from what I'd call kind of obvious to deeper. Let me illustrate. Imagine that you're a skilled market researcher with lots of good interviewing techniques and so on, and you've got me and you're asking me about why I bought a certain something, say a car. And I might say I got that model, that particular car, because I wanted a really bright red one. I prefer bright colours. The person, you, dig a little deeper. And I sort of say, well, I was looking at some other kinds, but, you know, they're kind of small. I was looking at a little sports car, but my partner, God, she'd go on. If I got that, she'd really whine. So I didn't get that one. And you dig a little bit deeper. I might say, well, yeah, you know, our budget is pretty stretched. I've had to take less hours after COVID, you know, so we don't have as much money as we did. So I couldn't get some of the other kinds. You dig a little bit deeper, you might get me to sort of confess that, oh, well, I was a working class boy. I grew up poor. I don't want to have the cheapest kind. I want to better myself a bit. Maybe if you're really, really skilled and you dig down, you might be able to identify that I've got a bit of a risk-averse personality. I don't really want to try the absolutely new kind. I want to get the kind of car that's been well tested and well looked at and reviewed everywhere. So there's these motivations, if you like, that go from the superficial to the more buried. It's important you realise, though, that deep is not the same as important. It's not necessarily that I bought the car because I've got a risk-averse personality. It may in fact be because it was bright red. Sometimes simple, obvious things are the deciding factors. Other times it's more complicated. Our motivations are mixed and all of them are real and operate together. Sometimes subconsciously, sometimes really, really fast, without us even realising. Why this matters particularly at the moment is that the COVID-19 crisis and all the surrounding things that are happening affects people's motivations at all levels. It's kind of like a king hit on all the motivational levels that I've just been talking about. Your personality affects your level of concern, your background impacts what you're concerned about, all the things that are going on around your social and family considerations become more prominent, your budget will be tighter, and at a more superficial level of motivation, some of the old imagery, you know, maybe the cruise liners or the French kissing or whatever that might be going on, or the pictures of self-indulgence may start to seem wrong. Your marketing materials may just feel a little bit icky or whatever. So your people's internal debate that's going on subconsciously, as I mentioned a minute ago, becomes more complex. So good marketing and good observation of your customers becomes more and more important. A really good way of thinking about all these levels of motivations and so on is to think about who people would reveal them to. Who would you talk to about it? And therefore, how hard is it as us as marketers to gather information at each of these levels of motivations? If you think about it, there's the stuff that is rather deep, maybe about your values, your worldview, your deepest desires that you would only tell perhaps a professional researcher or maybe even only a psychiatrist. Then there's the kind of things that maybe they're about, how your partner talks to you about what you buy, or about changes in your budgetary situation or whatever, that you might talk to a friend about over a coffee, or just with the right kind of questions. It's not hard to talk about them. Then there's the stuff that's simple, that you'll tell anybody, I like red cars. So it's a variation between deep and quite superficial in terms of what you'll reveal and who to who. So the other reason that this is really important is that if you're a small and medium enterprise, you typically get your information at that tell anybody anytime stage. I'm going to guarantee that most of your customers don't write an essay about their desires and motivations on their feedback form. I'm going to guess that, the customer that talks to you over the counter doesn't necessarily tell you all about their personal lives and the problems they're having with their husband or their budgets or all of that. Some of you will say, yes, I do. I've got customers like that, and do that. And you will, but I'm guessing they're probably not typical of your total customer base. It is the case that the kind of deep research that a bigger corporation might do on the highly deep desires is probably not something that you can or should waste your money on. But there are lots of things in between that can give you really useful information to help you position your business and think better about your marketing, just by having slightly more time with your customers and asking slightly better questions, a little probing, just a little bit deeper. And that's what I want to encourage you to do, to probe a little bit deeper at some of these mid-levels, the sort of things that people would tell a friend over a coffee. So we'll talk more in some of my 10-step sessions about how you can do that. But just for the moment, try and press a little about your customers to get beyond the superficial stuff they tell you about why they're doing things, or why they buy on you, your competitors rather than you, or whatever else. Look, your customers seldom lie to you. I'm not suggesting that they're not telling the truth on their feedback forms or whatever, but they're only going to tell you part of the truth. They tend to mention the easy things, that was nice quality, or the price was okay, or it was convenient to get to. Those sort of reasons for buying a service or product. But the real truth, and the truth that you need to get at to understand purchasing behavior or service choice better, is a mushy mixture of motivations. It's a lot of things going on underneath there, and if you can find out a little bit more about them, you're much better placed to be more creative in your marketing, as I'll explain in some of the other sessions. There is perhaps some good news coming out of that thinking about motivations as being at various depths, and that some of the more basic motivations and needs, the need for security and luxury or whatever, are likely to change fairly slowly, even in a crisis. But what I think we need to watch happening is the language that people use, the style of marketing they react to, and their priorities will, how they prioritize between different motivations, will change somewhat faster. That's what we really have to look at and understand in marketing. And let me show this by a couple of examples. So let's consider luxury marketing, the idea of that desire for a bit of luxury, whether it's a holiday getaway in an exotic place, or expensive chocolates or jewelry or whatever, those sort of marketing for that luxury items. If you go back to the old world, before COVID, you would have, and review a lot of the marketing for that, you'll see unapologetic, self-indulgent pictures and images, and people having hedonistic fun. It's all about status seeking. It's all about in-your-face extravagance. Now, my view is that in the new world, in number 2 in this diagram, I think you'll see much more of a move towards things like luxury being an earned reward, solace for your bad feelings at the moment and the hard times, a treat that your family deserves, something that gives you a little bit of comfort among all the problems that you're having. So the base desire will remain the same, but the way you justify it to yourself and to others will probably change. And the task of a marketer in these days, for whatever the desires that are behind your product or service, are to consider how the language and the style and the way that people justify and talk about these desires is changing. That's why I want you to keep probing your customers a little. But the big implication of this is, frankly, don't panic. Sure, some of your advertising and your marketing and things may need to adapt. There'll be tweaks that are needed. You should throw out the pictures of people on cruise ships doing, inappropriate things for the times. But much of the marketing that you'll be doing will still be well targeted at the core motivations behind why people buy your product and service. So adapt, watch people's behavior change, but don't feel that you immediately have to throw out the baby with the bathwater. Let me give an example of how I think values, the deeper values, won't change, and also perhaps how they will change to make it clear. So think yesterday, pre-COVID, pre-lockdown, all that sort of stuff. And let's imagine some horribly stereotyped professional young woman. I don't know where she is, in Auckland, New York, Sydney, wherever. She's, into all of these things. She's obviously got a feminist, a bit of environmentalism, health foods, and, she's got a family and a young child, but she likes to get out and about, yeah? So we take her, then she goes into lockdown. Everything's turns ill. The world is turned upside down. Now, tomorrow, do you think that she will be into local charities, into budget dinners? Will she start moving towards always putting her family first above her own career, change from health foods to lasagnas or whatever and things? Well, some of those things will probably happen because of the effect of lockdown and social change. Some of those things will become of more interest perhaps to such a person. But she won't wake up and suddenly turned into her grandmother. It doesn't happen exactly like that. It's much more likely that the impact will be on a change, a modification, a hybridization, not substitution of values. That yesterday's values will get modified and merge with emerging ones. She may become she may be less of a professional, her income might be a bit lower, she might have to cut back on her hours of work or whatever, but she's still going to be a professional young woman. She's still going to be interested in some sort of dining out experience occasionally. She's not going to completely change. Let me give another kind of example. This is a wonderful, wonderful lockdown pie created by a New Zealand woman who was a baker, an artisan baker pre-lockdown, and during lockdown she created and put out on social media all these amazing pies that she'd created for her family, were full of words expressing her anxiety and feelings. My God, what have I done? All those things that many of us were feeling at the height of lockdown and so on. Here's another couple of her lockdown pies. You can see she was a woman that expressed herself directly. Apparently that when one of the boys was particularly obstreperous, she said, "Here you are, you can eat shit, son." This was the pie on the left, but she also made a pie called octopi for a child's birthday. So you can see a beautiful octopi pie. And what you see here, and why I think this is an analogy of what I mean by the hybridization of values and motives, is there's comfort and attitude. There's the feelings of what's more comfortable than making a pie for your family, what's more traditional. But see how much attitude and feeling and emotion is also going into it. So consider how you can tweak old with emerging values, and that's why you need to observe people and see what they've become interested in and how that's affected what they used to be interested in. So really successful marketers in this period going forward are going to be those who understand what they were good at before and what their customers liked, and can adapt it and tweak it with how they are changing. There will be a new normal. I don't know what it is, but I'm pretty sure it will be a curious and unexpected mixture. It will not be exactly what some experts and people are currently predicting. And in your sector and your business, it's really important you just don't rely on experts. You need to develop your own marketing sixth sense and your own way of observing your customers. That's a lot of what the 10-step process elsewhere on this website is all about. Look, the big picture for marketers in the current crisis is don't panic. Yes, there will be lots of changes. Yes, people's motivations will change and the way they talk about them especially will change. You're going to have to be a little bit more subtle about observing what's happening and thinking about your marketing in a slightly more subtle way, about hybridizing old motivations with new ones. But it's not going to be a disaster if you do it right. In terms of thinking about the process for getting that right, there's some ideas that I have in terms of how to better observe your customers and how you can engage with them better in my 10 steps marketing process videos and the rest of the site. But thank you for watching. I hope I've said something interesting for you. Thanks.